Okay, go ahead, Jennifer. Why don't you start?
Great. Welcome everyone to the Roski Talk series. My name is Jennifer West. I'm the director of MFA Art, and welcome on behalf of Jenny Lin and myself. Jenny is the Master's in Curatorial Practice in the Public Sphere Master's Program. The Roski Talk series hosts lectures and panel discussions with artists, curators, scholars, thinkers, and designers. These events are the web that connect and feed the larger Roski community with the world, students, alumni, faculty, friends, and colleagues from many places. I'd like to thank all of the people who've made this series possible, starting with the faculty, Roski Talks Committee, Suzanne Lacey, Jenny Lin, Eva Wojcik, April Greiman. And I'd also like to thank faculty member Anu Vikram, who is teaching the Visiting Artist and Scholar series this semester. Additionally, I'd like to thank all of the staff who have made this possible, including Natalie Hozik, Kirsten Schmidt, and to the rest of the team, Jean, Timmy, Ray, Juan, Hike, and to our student workers. Tonight is the first public Zoom event of the semester, and we couldn't be more thrilled to host this event. And now I will turn you over to our graduate student introducers, Nadia Estrada and Kijun Liu. Take it away. And
hi, everyone. Kijun Liu, I'm a first year MFA student. And this is Natalie, who is gonna do the introduction with me tonight.
Hi, everyone. Hi, this is Nadia Estrada. I'm also a first year MA student at Roski. And we will be introducing Nawi Garcia, who helped organize this panel. So Kiju.
Yeah, so Nadia is a creator and writer from Mexico based in Los Angeles, California. Throughout her career, Nadia has dedicated herself to advancing the discourse of Latin American art. Her interests lie in exploring the representations of indigenous Americans and African people during the 18th and 19th century. Currently, her research is centered on art intervention as a political strategies against repressive regimes, mainly looking at the arts of the Art Actions Collective in Chile.
And prior to her graduate studies, Nawi served as curatorial assistant to curator Alibe Piliado at the Museo Nacional de Arte in Mexico City, where she conducted research for the 2018 exhibition Nawi Olin, La Mirada Infinita. She later pivoted to organizing public programming as program coordinator at the museum. In 2019, she curated the exhibition Look Who's Talking Now at Human Resources LA. And currently, as we now know, Nawi is a second year MA candidate in curatorial practices and the public sphere here at USC Roski. Welcome, Nawi.
Thank you, that's a really nice intro. So my name is Nadia Garcia, and I'm a second year MA student here at USC Roski. Today we are hosting a digital panel discussion on Mexico's art scene, where three emerging art professionals will describe the social conditions and formative events that have helped shape their career development. Each one of them comes from a distinct background, opening the door to a wide perspective on Mexico's creative sphere during a time of unprecedented changes. Before we get started, I would like to thank the USC Art History Department for their generous contribution to the event. And I would also like to take a brief moment to explain the format of tonight's event. The panel will run for about 45 minutes, and towards the end, we will open up the Q&A to the public. So please feel free to submit your questions starting now. Now, I would like to begin by introducing Alibe Piliado, who has previously served in curatorial positions in national institutions such as the Museo Nacional de Arte, MUNAL, and the Museo Nacional de San Carlos. Alibe, you possess an extensive knowledge on 20th century Mexican art. Can you talk a bit about what led you to working in the arts up to your concentration in modern art?
Sure. Thank you so much for the invitation. I'm thrilled to be here participating in this talk with Sebastian, Andrea, Nawi. Thank you. So I think I will begin a little bit by talking about from my background as art historian and curator. I think, and also an arts administrator who I also work. who led me to curatorial practice in museums and public institutions, because maybe you all know, most of the museums in Mexico are part of this government structure, the INBA, Instituto Nacional de Bellas Artes, or INA, these two different institutions who are in charge of the museums. And also one just quick note, Mexico City is just the second city in the world with the most museums ever, with 117 museums in the city. So it's a very institutionalized scene in one side. There's also other side I think we'll be talking about tonight as well. So I study art history. I'm an art historian by profession. So as many as you know, the discipline is based on very European knowledge. It's very male, it's very Western. And even in Mexico, half of the program, you will see a lot of European art, but also Mexican art. And the other half, it's very focused on these, on all of these processes of Mexican art. So I was deeply interested in this even before starting my program in art history, but also the connections between modern and contemporary art. So this is some of the museums where I used to work. The Museo Nacional de Arte, MUNAL, and San Carlos, the National Museum of San Carlos, both very close to each other in downtown Mexico City, as you may see, very European in the architecture and very European. The Museo Nacional de San Carlos holds the European collection from the Academy of San Carlos, and that it's the first Academy of Art in all the Americas. And the National Museum of Art holds 5 centuries of Mexican art for the last 5 centuries. So I think I was really interested, and when I had the opportunity to work as part of the curatorial team in the National Museum of Art, which is considered one of the most art museum in the country, that has this really big collection. And I think before even working at the museum, I was very interested in this modern, or the first half of the 20th century, because I think it was a very important way of showing and understanding Mexican art, not only national, but also international. I think, as you can see in some of these galleries in the next slide, it's a very institutionalized way of showing art, of talking about art, and a lot of people will come to the museum to see the big artists, the muralists, Rivera, Siqueiros, Orozco, these very important figures of the first half of the 20th century. But I think for me, when I was talking and studying modern art, there was a lot of other stories that hasn't been told yet. So I think this period of time is also essential to know. It's a time when all these stereotypes of Mexican and the Mexican art started. So I was very critical about it, and that is one of the ways that I wanted to study and show in the museum, new different ways of connecting to art, and also to bring these dialogues to life, to different aspects of our daily life, as being Mexicans, as being in Mexico City, in this big city. So for me, it was these experiences and connections that I wanted to do, and I wanted to have also with the public. As you can see here, there's this big collection of this 20th century art. So also one of the most relevant things of this museum, that it's kind of controversial as well, is that the museum, the National Museum of Art, ends their collection in the 1950s. So they have this connection with contemporary art. And just recently in 2016, there was the first acquisition and gifts of contemporary art to the museum. So for me, it was really important also to have those different interests that the museum at that time can show and can start building new connections with what was happening in the scene by the time. So as you can see in the next slide, one of the projects that I contributed was this one, Por los siglos de los siglos, an exhibition of Bosco Sodi at the Museo Nacional de Arte. In 2017, this was an exhibition with these contemporary artists doing dialogues between Beistrigal, 19th century, 20th century art that give another feeling, sense, and way of understanding art. It was not an academic way of thinking. It was a very free way of approaching the artworks. So this project, I co-curated it, and it was a really new way of understanding how this modern art connects to contemporary art. So that was one of the most important things for me by the time. And I think also one of these really issues that interested me when we were talking about modern art, it was the depiction of women artists in the collection and in the museums in Mexico. I always did these checklists of how many women artists were in the museum. Obviously, it was a very small percentage. I was the curator of the exhibition Nahui Olin, La Mirada Infinita, who now we also collaborated with. In 2018, the curator Mariano Mesa recovered the Nahui Olin history for the public. And this was just the second exhibition of a women artist in the history of the museum. So these changes that I noticed in the museum were really triggering for me to understanding new ways of creating curatorial processes, but also to understand art in a different way. And as you can see in the next slide, I think that's also one of the things that shaped how I think and work with art. So as you can see here, this sculpture, the one on marble to the right, is by Jesus F. Contreras, Malgré Tout, or Nonetheless. This sculpture was done first for the Alameda Central Park just in downtown Mexico City. Then this sculpture was removed and moved to the museum just for conservation purposes, and they did a replica of this and they put it in the park. And after 2019 and different protests in the city, they recovered this piece with different activism practices through this graffiti to show the depiction of women in art. So I think that was real triggering for me to understand in different ways how to deal with art for now.
Thank you so much, Alive, for that. As you have mentioned, your career has taken a shift from taking a look at 20th century art. And in your recent essay that you shared with some of the MA and MFA student, A World Without Monuments, you talk about how monuments can be activated through performative acts, especially acts of dissent that protest gender-based violence. What initiated the shift into the work that you're doing now?
Yeah, I think this way of seeing art outside the institution. I think when we're working in institution, we're so focused on the collection and how we can work with the collection, how we can connect with the public. And sometimes we're not aware of what is happening outside and how we can not serve the institution to the community, but just the opposite. So the institute working for the community. So I think for me, this swift or seeing these performances, this activism, these art practices just going on the streets were a breaking point to understand how curatorial processes can be done different. So I think what happened in 2019, in the next slide, maybe some of you will know, there was this huge protest in the city after, in 2019, in August 2019, after policemen abused a minor. There was this a new way to understand how the feminist movement was working, and also how tired women were in Mexico City, a city where violence, all women have suffered violence at some point in the city, almost every day. Around 11 women are killed every day. There's a really bad way of just being a woman in Mexico. So when they did this intervention in the Angel of Independence in Reforma Avenue, one of the most important avenues in the city, things started to change, not for only artists, but for curators and artists who started to work with this, like Julieta Gil or Nirvana Paz. They started to work with what was going on. And I think this was also a connection with contemporary history of contemporary art, because the first feminist collective in Mexico, Polvo de Gallina Negra, that was formed in the 80s, the first performance they did was in a monument as well. So they did it in the monument to Benito Juarez. So how do we recover these spaces through these practices, and how we can just work with these themes? I was doing this research and talks with a colleague, with a friend, Andrea Chavez, who's an anthropologist and also an art historian, who we were just trying to have different conversations, not just in the institution, but outside the institution. So I think this is something that is currently going on. And as you can see also in the next slide, one of the graffitis in the Angel of Independence was really powerful. It was, besides calling this very rage and stressful and angry quotes, there was the one quote and the graffiti that said, living is art, vivir si es vida, vivir si es arte. It was part of this connection of how you find art, not only in institutions. So this just happened last Saturday. So it's part of this reconnection with the public spaces. The museum is a public space, the institution is a public space, but it's not covering what is happening right now. So this is the Glorieta de las Mujeres que Luchan, a roundabout also in the same avenue, in the Reforma Avenue, where the Columbus sculpture monument used to be. They removed Columbus, and then there was big controversy about the new monument that was going to be put in here. But just on Saturday, a collective took the monument through a performative action, very, very powerful, and just built this. So this is part of what is happening right now. And this is also one of my breaking points and what I want to keep working right now and for my next curatorial processes and researches. So yeah, I think that is part of how everything connects.
Thank you, Olive. Just for context, especially since some people might not know, can you talk to us a bit more about the sculpture that was going to be, that Columbus was going to be replaced with?
Yes. It was just, I think it's a very controversial topic, but there's this artist, a male white artist, Pedro Reyes, who they commissioned him a sculpture that was going to be a depiction of indigenous woman. It was going to be Tlali, that it was like a connection between women and the earth, but I think it was very controversial since the beginning, because it's a male artist. Even they say that he was working with different women artists and sculptors. I think it was really bad. They didn't even have an open call or anything to know what's going to happen with the public space. And I think this is repeating the same structures of hegemony and power that we can see from these monuments that are from the 20th century art. So you find these connections again with modern and contemporary art. And I think, now that project, Tlali, and this project of this artist is canceled, or they say that they change their version every day. So I'm not sure in which they are right now. And they say they're going to have another, an open call on for other projects. But I think this is just the way how the feminist movement is acting right now, recovering the spaces by showing that they are not afraid, and we are not longer afraid. That's one of the also the quotes that we say. So I think this is just saying what is happening right now in the scene, and what can we do now as curators, and how we can work with these artists to continue building new ways of collaboration, because I think that's what we do, or facilitation of experiences as curators. So yeah, that's, you can look it out. There's a lot of articles, I think, hyperallergic as well. So we can link some of them.
Thank you. Also, someone in the comment box said, they answered the question. The article is not online. Okay. All right. Oh, yeah. So we'll move into the next. I'll stop the share and I'll move on to the next. So now I'll introduce Andrea. Andrea, your career has recently, Andrea, you have a really interesting background in institutional development. You have previously worked as the coordinator of the summer program at Soma Mexico, and as Chief of Strategic Alliances at the Museum of Modern Art in Mexico. But you're also the founder of the Panorama Proyecto, which is a platform that helps or assists artists and art collectives seek fundraising. What has your experience been like, especially in a city where most institutions are government funded?
Okay, well, hello. First of all, thank you very much for the invitation to this panel. I wanted to give just a brief introduction of myself before answering to the question. And well, I just wanted to say that my background is in cultural management. And I studied a master's degree in arts administration at Columbia University in New York City because I wanted to become a professional in the development of arts organizations. So that's my field of expertise. And just as Olive explained with this wonderful presentation, Mexico has a very large history and tradition of state-owned cultural institutions. And so that means that most museums, art schools, grants, festivals are state-owned here in Mexico. However, this landscape has changed over the time. And by the 90s, some artists who, by the way, studied, many of them MFAs in the United States and also in Europe, funded artist-run spaces. That was the case of, for example, La Panadería, which was funded by Joshua Ocon and Miguel Calderon. Also, other artist-run spaces were Temistocles 44, funded by Eduardo Baroa, Pablo Vargas Lugo, Abraham Cruz Villegas, Daniela Rosell, and Sofia Taboas. And other artist-run spaces that still go on are, for example, La Quiñonera, that was funded by Nestor and Hector Quiñones and others. So these artist-run spaces were an alternative to the state offer at that time. Especially, it was an alternative for contemporary art projects and exhibitions, which at the time didn't get much support by the state. So eventually, by the 2000s, the art market in Mexico began to flourish, for example, with the art fair Sonamaco, and non-for-profits became more prevalent as well, for example, like Jumex Foundation. This situation mainly happened because of the new political party that won the elections in the early 2000s, after 70 years of the same party in power. So because of these changes in the economy and politics, the art world in Mexico became more diverse. It also became more competitive because of the need to finance or to fund these art projects. So the for-profit and non-profit sectors became more relevant to the point that here in Mexico, even public institutions like museums, they have to open their own non-for-profits inside the public museums or institutions in order to get funding for their exhibitions and programming from the private sector. That was because also the budget cuts from the government impacted on the operations of the museums and these art institutions. For example, I work at the Museum of Modern Art of Mexico, which is a state-owned museum, and it is known for its collection of Mexican muralists like Diego Rivera, Siqueiros, and also other artists like Remedios Varo or Frida Kahlo are in this collection. And even if it's a museum state-owned and they receive funding from the government, they still don't have enough money to support their programming. So that's why they open their non-for-profits and they get sponsorships from companies to support their operations. And well, this only means that the money from the government that before was for these institutions and infrastructure, it can't support the entire system of museums. And to be honest, sometimes these museums don't even have enough money to even pay paper for the printing machine, you know. So sometimes they don't have any money and they have to go for these non-for-profits and sponsorships. So some of the artist-run spaces that I was telling you about that appeared in the 90s, some of them, they didn't make it, but some others transformed through this time through the 90s to the 2000s and became other organizations. For example, La Panadería, it became later on into SOMA. SOMA is a non-for-profit organization focused on contemporary art education for artists. And well, I worked there as a coordinator for the SOMA summer program, but also I worked for their development department with grant writing, special events, collaborations with universities, etc. So their business model has been very successful in fundraising here in Mexico. And because they get different funding, not only from the government, they do get some public funding, but they also get money from foundations in Mexico, foundations internationally, and support from art collectors. And in some way, and in my opinion, has become a model for artist-run spaces here in Mexico that opened the doors after, and of course, artist-run spaces that are currently working. More or less by 2015, more artist-run spaces began opening their doors and their projects. For example, Bikini Wax is a very good example of that. Ladron Galeria also is a good example of these artist-run spaces that happen after, and they're, let's say, a little bit like 10 years after SOMA opened. And many artists began to become more interested in opening their own artist-run space or having their own project. So this has resulted in an art world or in an art scene here in Mexico City that is a lot more diverse. There's a lot more offer because of that as well. And it has been, of course, very positive for the city. Yet there is a huge challenge for these independent art spaces or artist-run spaces, small galleries, platforms, art projects, which is to keep relying on public funding to survive for some of them. And this idea that the art should be public or or state-owned, it is still very integrated into many people's minds. And it, of course, impacts in the consumption of arts events and products or art products, because some people still believe that the art should be a public good, that it should be state-owned, and of course, it should be for free. So that's one of the issues of these artist-run spaces.
Thank you so much for that. That was very descriptive. So it seems like from what you have shared with us and from all the experience that you have, that your experience in development has led you to your current project, which is Panorama Proyecto. Could you share with us a bit more about the inception of Panorama Proyecto and its future goals?
Yes, well, it is a pretty small project as well, and pretty young, but the idea of this project is basically have a platform for fundraising education that it's online. So the idea is to give out classes about fundraising, how to do it, how to, like grant writing, special events, memberships, all those things. And the idea came because I believe it is very important to learn about how to finance your own projects and also your career, because many of these projects that I just mentioned, they are projects from artists. So it's part as well of their career to do this type of projects. And well, of course, I'm especially focused on small artist-run spaces. Also, besides giving out classes, I give out some services like grant writing, budgeting, accounting as well, and some stuff about taxes that are very complicated here in Mexico for non-for-profits and small organizations. So that's what I do at this project. And another thing that I am really interested in is researching a little bit more about what is happening in the city and which type of projects are going on. So in the Panorama Instagram account, following different projects and sharing some of the projects that I think are interesting or that are pretty new or that I like. So I wanted to show you some of the artist-run spaces that currently they're going on, that right now, maybe they're new, they have like a couple of years going on, but that I think that they are very interesting and that they're reflecting in some way what is happening in the city in terms of artist-run spaces or organizations that are not institutional or public funded. So yeah, the first one is Casa Lu. Yeah, well, Casa Lu is a project that I like very much. It's a residency for artists. It's an international residency, and people can go there, stay for a short period of time, and they can produce their work. Also, what I like of this project is that Casa Lu helps their artists to sell their work. So that's an interesting model. The next one that I brought to you is it is a feminist platform that I like very much. The name is Lolita Bank. And in this platform, they're interested in offering art history classes, online and offline exhibitions. But the main point is, or for me at least, is that they work as a network for women artists and queer artists as well. So this project is interesting because it's like an online platform. The next one is Salon Silicon. Well, this is a gallery. So it's kind of a different model, but what I think it's interesting is that also artist-run spaces now, they function as maybe residencies, exhibition spaces, they have maybe art education, and now galleries can also be kind of some sort of artist-run space because artists run these galleries in some cases. So this one, Salon Silicon, it's a very good example of a small gallery that has a strong program and that it's very well known in the community. They support queer artists, women artists, and other members of the LGBT community. The next one is a Studio Block 74. It is a studio building. They have different buildings. They have different studios in this building, and also they have a residency program in there. And their main focus is on sculpture. So I thought it was a good example to show how these artist-run spaces, these projects, they are becoming more specialized as well. And recently, they just launched a magazine that is only specialized in sculpture, and the name is Bloque. The next one is Zona de Desgaste. This is a collective that it's a collective in which their members get together to do group critiques around different topics like contemporary art, aesthetics, psychoanalysis, creative writing, and contemporary philosophy. And it's interesting that this project is about like getting together, discuss readings, lectures, and have like discussions about this type of topics. The next one and the last one is El Renero. It's a very, very new project, but I thought it was also very interesting because this one is funded by a Mexican artist that used to live in Chicago, and now she came back to Mexico City, and they are working on an exhibition program And also they have group critiques in this space. But what I thought it was interesting is that they already understand that the scene is very international. So their program is already in English and in Spanish. And well, I wanted to show you this space, because a lot of the projects right now, and after COVID-19 and all this, they became a lot more international, a lot more open. They have to find new ways to support, to fund. They are now collaborating with other people abroad. Also, a lot of people from different places, mainly from the United States, are coming to Mexico City. They are also launching their own projects. They're having their studios in here. So I think that it's very interesting how these artist-run spaces have developed, and they are growing a lot, and they are more international now. So the objective of Panorama is to, if possible, to help these kind of projects to find ways to support, or to find ways to fund, to get funding. Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Thank you, Andrea. I hope that people can check out Andrea's project online. I think Jennifer shared the link. Now I'll move on to Sebastian. Sebastian, you are the founder of Salon Acme, an annual art fair that collaborates with artists within and outside of Mexico City. And I find it really interesting that you decided to start Salon Acme. As someone who doesn't know much about Mexico City art market, I'd really like to know what inspired you to start the fair.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for the invitation. So probably I should start also with a bit of my background. I started to work in art since I was like 15 years old in Guadalajara, in a space called Oficina para Proyectos de Arte, which was an artist-run space, like Andrea was saying. It was led by Jose Davila, Gonzalo Lebrija, and they were doing, it was basically a project space, and I got exposed to art and got more into it and started researching and getting into my own career. And also in Guadalajara, we started a studio with two of my colleagues in Salon Acme, which was called La Favorita. So in this studio, we started to play with the idea of being an artist and how to get to a gallery or to a big fair. There was like a gray space or gray area. So we started like playing with this concept, and we came out with Salon Acme, which mainly focuses on an open call that we launch every year. We have a curatorial board that selects the work that gets shown. So, I mean, in the first year, as you can see here, we had people and like doing performance there, painting. We try to include everything. And we also try to have this like big artists show with artists that were starting. So if you can go to the next slide, please. So this is also a photo of our first edition. This is a piece by Jose Davila, who also supported the program a lot. And it has been really, I mean, the Salon Acme has been happening for 10 years now. So yeah, it's been quite a journey and a struggle also, because we don't have any support from the government. We found like a new program, like to work with brands to become like this platform for artists. And I think it has been working since the first edition. Artists that were like, it was their first show. Now they work with galleries in Europe, like, because they were seen at Salon Acme. So that's our main focus. So yeah, I mean, now the program has expanded a lot. It's not just the open call. it's also the guest state. So we try to invite a different state of the Mexican Republic to do a show. So we invite a curator that is working with the art scene in that state to do a show, and it's totally free. They can do whatever they want. We have another area that is called Bodega Acme, which shows the work of artists that already shown at the open call. But at that point in their careers, they have, I mean, they're grown, so we try to stay connected and show and keep showing their work. And also we have a new section that we work with galleries, so it's more like a regular fair, but I mean, we tell galleries to invite an artist that is not represented by them. So to try to keep this platform mode for everyone that is showing during Salon Acme. Also, this is, we try to play with formats. So the idea came from these art salons that were showing like what was happening in the city, which I think is so important, because you go to the fair, to like the main fair, which is also really important that it exists, but you go and everything is untouchable or unavailable or too expensive, or so we try to open this channel for new collectors and new artists, and we set a limit on the prices. The prices now, I think, is the maximum is $1,500 for the open call pieces. So also to make art available for the public that likes it. So I think we play around with the concept of the fair. This is the new space in which has been happening Salon Acme for 5 years. This year, of course, we couldn't do it. We pushed it to February. So hopefully it can happen this year. But also the project during its career has taken us to different cities, and also to bring these artists and to showcase them there. We've been in New York twice, in Colombia, in Brussels, in different projects or fairs. So I think that's our main focus and what we want to do with the project.
Thank you. Something that you mentioned when we talked was that you had, because of COVID, you had to move the fair from February, when it's Art Week, to September. And I was wondering if you could talk a bit more about that, this edition.
Yeah, of course.
Who were the jurors and who were the artists?
Yeah, I mean, this year we were planning, we were ready because we launched the open call last year. We normally launch it during August, and we close it, I think it's mid-October. So we were ready to do it on February. We had the selection of the works because it gets selected with a curatorial board. This year we have Elena Chavez McGregor, Paloma Contreras, Laura Cortez, which is the director of Soma, that they mention Soma a lot. Guadalajara 90210, it's an art collective, and Alan Cervais, which is a collector. So with this curatorial board, we try to get like the different aspects of the art world. No? We have collectors, we have galleries, we have artists, we have academics. So we try to mix it, and that's how and what makes interesting the open call, I think. So sorry, this year we pushed it then to April and then to September, and it couldn't be done. So now we are going back to February with the other art fairs, and hopefully it can happen. Also this year we have, I think we had around 1,500 applicants, and the selected artists are 59. So yeah, we have to do a long review of the artist. We accept every technique from performance to sculpture, happenings, whatever, we're open to it. As long as, I mean, we are limited because of the space. But this year we had 1,500 applicants, and from all over the world. We were really surprised because we had like from Japan, Israel, Brazil, Italy. So yeah, I think the open call is getting bigger and more recognized. And also we have like an award that gets selected from the curatorial board, which is a residency at Casa Wabi for a month and a half. So this also like helps launches, like to launch someone's career, no? So we are basically interested on being that platform for artists.
And I know I was reading a bit about Salon Acme, and I was wondering if there was an age limit for the artist.
No, we are open to any age. I mean, we had one guy who was a painter. He was 70, and he had an amazing work, but he never got to a space that they wanted to show it. Mm-hmm. So yeah, he ended up showing it here and started working with a gallery. So yeah, we're open to anything really. So there's no age limits, country, anything.
Thank you. Thanks. Let's see. Well, thank you to the three of you for your presentations. Alive, Andrea, and Sebastian, you have given us a distinct perspective on Mexico's art landscape, ranging from institutional museums, independent art spaces, and art fairs. Now that the public knows a bit about your work, I would like to open up the Q&A for any questions. But in the meantime, I think I'll ask one question to the three of you. Some of you are currently living in Mexico and some of you are currently abroad. But how do you see the arts and institutional landscape in Mexico changing or evolving in the near future?
I think there's the scene in Mexico City. It's really interesting now because there's a lot of new spaces like Andrea was mentioning. It's really emergent and really different cultures are collaborating and creating like kind of like this new art vibe, and more like there's like openings every week. Like 10 years ago, this was crazy. I mean, it's really interesting the moment in the city. Also, institutions are being more open to do different shows. Like Alive was mentioning, like Munal was a really classical museum, and now he's collaborating with different kind of artists. So I think it's a really interesting moment for the city.
Thank you. Andrea, Alive? I can go to the next question too. That's okay. So fine. One question for Alive from Jenny Lynn. Alive, can you please elaborate on how you envision curating the work you presented, including graffiti, performance, and urban interventions? Since exhibiting such works as documentation within an institution risks diminishing the works critically, what strategies do you think art professionals can employ to ensure, as you articulated so well, that our institutions serve the public and effectively respond to protests and calls to action?
Great question. Really, really difficult as well. But I think, as you mentioned, there has been some criticism on how institutions can work with this. For example, Julieta's Hill work on what happened in the Angel of Independence in 2019 was shown last year at the Tamayo Museum of Contemporary Art. And there was a lot of criticism towards it about also like the institution, how does this work for it? Do you are recontextualizing it in a way that is not critic enough? I think that the presence and power of the institution is good and bad at the same time. I think when I'm envisioning these kind of new approaches to curation, I am not only thinking in the institution. I think the institution can help to facilitate experiences like talks, performances, and other kinds of experiences, not only in the galleries. For me, I think one way of envisioning this is the performances on the streets. The performances that are just public, and how you can just go and see what happened, how you can experience that, how can you heal when you also live this art. I think that is one of my main concerns there, to just work in situ in these public spaces, because they are public. You can work towards creating some projects in there that maybe the institution can facilitate, but also that you can work with other artists, with other women curators who are interested in working with this. Because also I think we need to take advantage that those things are there, and you can just leave the art in situ and what happened and all this energy of the performances, because we are also in the risk of losing it. They are starting to erase these graffitis. They are starting to erase this memory, and this is also the government. So how can you work with it? And I think the work of other artists as Nirvana Paz and Julieta Gil, that they capture this moment and document the work, and then you can translate it to an institution, but in a very careful way of presenting it. It's a good way of connecting with this. So I think there's a lot of different strategies, and it's really complex how you can work with this. But I think one thing that the institutions and all the curators need to do is approach the collectives, approach the artists, not work as a authoritarian way of explaining what is happening right there. So I think for me, that is one way to approach that. And I don't know if there's only one way to respond to this protest and call to action. I don't think there is a methodology also to approach this, because all of these projects are different, and you need to be like really careful. And I think it's just a way of hear other persons, collaborate with them, and then you can with them you can create something. It's not just like being curator on this authoritarian just way, but just to facilitate experiences, to live this, to understand it, and to heal collectively. I think that is one way to approach it.
Thank you, Olive. And I think that especially because your work deals a lot, your recent work deals a lot with the current government, that's a great segue to the question that we have in the Q&A from Donatio Garcia. He asked, do the Mexican curators in the panel consider a positive shift that happened in an administrative way on our public spaces after the new government in 2018 in Mexico City?
Oh, I mean, I have worked in the last 5 years. I worked for public institutions. I just, on February, I stopped working for the National Museum of San Carlos. And I live this shift of the changes and the political things that also deal with museums. I don't think there was a positive change at all. There was a 75% cut of the budget for all public institutions in 2020. There was no budget at all. And there's also, I think, as Andrea was saying, there's a lot of problems on how a board of trustees can work in a museum. There are no laws to facilitate that other way of getting funding in the institution. So I mean, it's really bad. And I think also some of these projects that they want to do, like the Centro Cultural Chapultepec, by giving power to one of the most famous artists, Gabriel Orozco, and paying $1 billion pesos to build new museums that, I mean, I think there's a lot of museums that are really neglected, and museums that work with communities that are not being taken care of. So I don't think there was a positive change or shift at all. I think it's quite the opposite. And there's no funding right now for institutions to create new ways. I think that's why Andrea and Sebastian explained really well how there are other organizations that are moving towards that. And I think there's it's a crisis right now in institutions in Mexico. And yeah, it's not positive at all. Just for short answer, because I can talk.
I wanted to add that these problems come from before, like these programs, they already have them, but with this administration and then the pandemic, it became even more obvious, even bigger, like the problems became bigger.
Thank you. Yeah, that's a good reflection on the situation. I know there's someone who had raised their hand. I can't see their names, but if you raised your hand.
Jean Lee had raised their hand, so I'm gonna
Yeah.
let them talk.
Okay.
Jean, if you have a question, go ahead and unmute yourself.
Sorry, that was by mistake.
Okay, no worries. We'll send you back.
Okay. All right.
Got another question from
There's a question
Carlos
from,
and one from Andy.
I see one from Andy here. I'll just go ahead and read it. So Andy says, it's interesting what you said, Andrea, about spaces often doubling, tripling as galleries, residencies, and centers where artists can come together to engage in group critique. And I found it interesting that this was put into coordination with the central role government funding plays in supporting more formalized institutions. Though it is not enough, what role do educational institutions play in this ecosystem? And museums attached to educational institutions such as MUAC and Museo del Chopo, both related to UNAM, for example, I would assume their funding follows the government institutional model, but were some of the alternative spaces seated in this educational institutions?
Well, that's a really good question. What happens with these educational institutions? At least for the ones that you talk about, those ones, yes, they are governmental funding. They have funding from the government, and the same, like the same dynamic works for these institutions, in which they also have to open some non-for-profits. Not all of them, because not all of them have the capacity to do that. But the big ones, sometimes they have to get funding through other ways that is not only from the government. So yeah, I believe it's kind of like a similar situation from other museums and institutions that are managed by the Instituto Nacional de Bellas Artes or the Ministry of Culture. And about this alternative spaces, I believe that they're from very different roots, all of them. Some of them, I've noticed that there are people that are coming from other places, and then they come here and then they decided to do a project in here because it's cheaper to do it in here than do it in other cities or countries. Some other people, I've seen that I don't know, that they met each other at school and then they started this type of projects. And however, I do know that there are some programs that are, for example, from UNAM, that they are kind of some sort of incubator for projects and organizations. And then some of these projects, then they can be seated in these educational institutions, but not necessarily like they come from there. Maybe they have some sort of programs and then they become like this independent art spaces. But yeah, well, that's how I see it.
Thank you, Andrea. Related to that, Carlos Avila asked a question that maybe Andrea or Sebastian would be interested in answering, maybe I'll leave it too. Are there any institutions / art spaces that are focused on providing art for people that live in the outskirts of the city.
Yes, I can think of well, there's it's a contemporary museum, el Museo de Arte Contemporáneo de Catepec. This is a very good project in the Catepec. It's in the state of Mexico, really close to the city. And it's a project just a few years ago, they did this one, and they are doing a lot of great contemporary art practices with communities there, but not like, it's very collaborative. So I think that's one of the most important things of this project, and I can link some of these information there. And I think that's one of that pops right now to my head.
Great. Do you think you can maybe send the name on the chat? Thank you. Now, before I forget, Jenny Lynn also asked another question for everyone. Do you think Mexico's official state institutions can support marginalized, critical, and/or experimental artists, or should contemporary artists and art professionals shift their attention to alternative non-governmental artist-run commercial, etc. venues like those Sebastian and Andrea presented?
I think now it's easier to get involved with something like these projects, because to get like support from an institution, you have to go through all this process. And like, because of the government now, it's not really a big, it's more the work you have to do that what you get back. So now this emerging scene is pushing and pulling projects, and I think it would get like, I think it's better like to start with those kinds of new institutions and to start to work aside from the government.
Okay. Anyone else? I can go to the next question that we have in the chat. Eric Serrato asked, what is the relationship like between the contemporary art scene in CDMX and that of works done by Mexican Americans or Mexicanos in the diaspora? Is there a dialogue between these distinct and thriving roles among artists, institutions, curators, and others?
I mean, for what I know in the institutional scene, there has been some exhibitions working with artists in the US and in the diaspora. I mean, of course, they have retrospectives to big artists like Guillermo Gómez Peña. That I think this happened like some years ago at the Museo de Arte Moderno. So there's an interest in doing that. There was also an exhibition in 2018 in the Museo Carrillo Gil. It was building bridges, I think was the title of the exhibition, working with a lot of Los Angeles, LA-based artists and their connections to Mexico City. Most of the artists are Mexican American, and that was the first time that they were in Mexico City. So it was a really big and good connections and talks with the artists from LA and in Mexico. And I think, I don't know if there's like an organization who works building these connections, but I know there are some projects working with this. And I think it is something that also we need to be working more.
Yeah, I wanted to add to that even if there are some like efforts, I don't see like a continuous work to bring together or to make more bridges between like both scenes, and that it's something that can be developed. Like that's a really good opportunity to make it grow.
I'm wondering for Sebastian, do you usually get artists from the United States, from the US, or do you know if you got how many you got this year that you'll be showing?
From the US, I think there's like around 4. But yeah, we get proposals from all over, and we like that. So yeah, we're open to it. We have a few artists from Italy, Japan, Israel, Brazil, Colombia, Spain, Mexico, and yeah, I guess that's all about it.
All right, thank you. And I guess I'm talking about artists from different parts of the world. Jennifer West had a question. She says that when she was at SOMA, she says, I was happy to meet many artists from Central and South America and other regions in Mexico. Their contemporary art knowledge was refreshing and not the same as the general knowledge taught in the US, which is focused towards contemporary art in parts of CDMX and other parts of Mexico and Latin America. Can you elaborate on this? Did I read the question right?
Jennifer, maybe you can clarify for us a little bit. Are you asking what about how art is taught in Mexico, whether it's focused on CDMX, or are you commenting on the broader cultural production that's happening outside of those centers?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. Sorry, there was a little mistake in there because I couldn't see my whole screen. Basically, it was just very refreshing to see that there was a very different set of kind of cultural knowledge that they were sharing with me. And in some ways, the references that I was telling them, which most people say would have been taught here or know here, they didn't know about at all, which I just thought it was interesting because it was a very shifted knowledge. And it's just one of those moments where you think this is really interesting, and there's a different set of knowledges that are produced. And there were a number of artists from Argentina when I was at SOMA and other parts of Latin America. So that was just interesting to me to think, okay, there's really a marked difference here between the kind of contemporary art knowledge that is being produced in general. And if you can elaborate, if you think that this is true, or if this was something kind of specific to SOMA.
No, I will say that it is true. It might be true. Yeah, I have the impression as well that in Mexico, maybe we don't have a lot of projects that are focusing, for example, on, I don't know, for example, artists in Los Angeles. But there is an interest on creating or developing more relationships with artists or art organizations as well. The same for independent art spaces in Colombia, in Brazil, also in Chile, I would say also Argentina. And I even have the idea that nowadays there is some sort of interest in like these countries like Guatemala and Central, I forgot the name, but you know, like Guatemala, Honduras, El Salvador, other countries, but they are from Latin America. So I believe that that's true. We might have an interest to the South as well.
Yeah, I think also in the institutional level, I have seen more projects with museums in Latin America, and also, for example, with Colombia, with Chile. There's been a lot of new connections or reconnections with them, because mostly, I mean, it's been this idea that you have to point out to Europe or point out to the US and to have other kind of dialogues with these collections. And I know there are some projects right now going on with Chile, and they're going towards criticism of the academic aspect of history of art history in Mexico. So I know I understand that now there is more interest into having these connections between Latin America and also from a modern art aspect, but also I think contemporary art. There's also a lot of new ways to engage with these artists, and I think also it's how you say about how artists in Mexico are different from the knowledge in the US. I think it is maybe really important to point that out, and how they connect to other artists in Latin America, and because it's like a very easy way to engage, to support, and to create, having this past of connective historic past. I think it's really good also to say it now.
Thank you. Since we're talking about the artist spaces in Soma, Jose Sanchez has a question in the Q&A. I'll answer it. So regarding artist-run spaces, he asked, what organizational techniques, for example, strategies for funding, public engagement, or promotion, have you seen utilized that aided in the longevity of the group/spaces? Andrea?
Sure. Well, just very briefly, of course, people, they keep like applying to public funding, because we have this fund that the name is FONCA, and it has grants for organizations, projects, artists, and people still ask for a lot of this public funding. But also some people are applying to foundations here in Mexico. More and more people are looking for opportunities to make collaborations or fund or getting grants internationally from foundations in other countries. And what it's really exciting, at least for me, and that I believe that right now it's something that needs to be explored, is a variety of new things that can happen, from memberships. I don't know, like people are using now Patreon. People are selling merchandising. A lot of people are now selling services, giving out classes, making exchanges with other organizations, and also looking ways to collaborate with companies, with corporations or businesses in order to succeed with their funding. So I believe that what is interesting right now is that there are no rules, and with people, we use more than ever the web. And there are a lot of new applications, new types of programs, and ways to get funding. Crowdfunding, for example, is another thing that it was already popular, but it became again popular. And I think that's the interesting thing. And small arts organizations are figuring out their own models to get this funding. And I think that's the great part of what is happening, I guess.
And just for context, do you think you can talk or explain a bit about FONCA, like how many people get selected and how often it is?
Sure. So there is this fund for they have different categories of grants, and it's from the government. So during the entire year, there are different openings of grants applications in which you can apply. For example, if you have a festival, you can apply for a grant to cover some of the expenses of the festival. Or there are some other for projects as well that you can ask for money. But some of the grants that are the most popular are the ones for young artists and kind of mid-career artists or established artists. And this is an interesting fund because and also a very popular fund because people like to apply to that because they can get like a monthly fee to leave, and then they can focus on producing their work. So that's also like a very, very popular grant. And of course, not a lot of people get it because it's very competitive. But still, it is very popular, and it has supported tons of projects. It started back in 1988, and it is still working. Yeah.
Sebastian, did you want to add something to that?
No, I mean, I just wanted to add that there's also grants from institutions like HUMEX also supports, like if you want to do to study abroad, or if you have a project or an editorial project. I think HUMEX grant is really great. There's also, it's very competitive, but if you make it, I think it's really, really great support.
Thank you. I'll answer Fatima's question because it's been here for a while. She says, I noticed art pieces behind you. Can you guys name the artists that made them, please? Who goes first?
I will start. This is Tláhuac Mata. He's from Mexico City, and it's a piece I bought actually at Salon Acme. So it's a painting.
Is there a person in the painting?
No, it's like, let me get closer. Can you see better?
Yeah.
Like a damaged landscape. So yeah, and actually after this edition of Acme, he got into a gallery, and the next year he was showing at the main fair, and he was still showing with us. So it was like doing it both.
Well, the pieces that are on my back are from my boyfriend's dad. He's an artist. His name is Alejandro Flores. Yeah, so there it is.
I guess
I mean, I think I have just this little one, but unfortunately, I don't know the artist. But this is was made by one of these students of the arts, the School of the Art Institute of Chicago, and this is placed in the student lounge. So that's how we are dealing with this space right now.
And there's another. Did you answer the Eric? Yeah.
I'll ask that question right now. Well, thank you. So Eric Kim asked, LA has a lot of alternative organizations now, as opposed to 10 years ago, that are experimenting with different sustainability ideas and curatorial principles. What have your experiences been and observations on working with US organizations / artists / spaces? Are there any artists or organizing methodologies that might be particularly interesting to us in LA? So I know, Alive, right now you are working with the museum in Chicago. What has that experience been like, or your observations have been with working with an US institution?
Yeah, I mean, working with different museums in the US and Mexico, it's different and not similar in a way. I think the institutions have very similar methodologies on how to create an exhibition, how to collaborate with curators and different artists. I think the methodologies in the US are temporarily, they take longer. I think they, for example, if they want to do a show, they will have 3 years in advance to prepare it. And in Mexico, it's more like immediate. The work is really fast, and it's more fast, I think. So yeah, that's a way to create. But I think in independent spaces, it's a whole different thing. I I think Andrea and Sebastian will know a little bit more about that, but I think that methodologies maybe for arts organizations are very, they change depending on who you are working with. And I think maybe that connection just to approach different communities and different people will change. I don't think using methodologies for art, it's like the best way of creating something. But I think maybe when you are working with different institutions, I mean, of course, in the US, there's more funding if you're working in a big institution, just like the Art Institute is, the Art Institute of Chicago. But I think some of the goals also may be really similar, and also some of the critic inside institution also it's happening right now. So yeah, I don't know in the alternative organizations how maybe Sebastian and Andrea who have worked with different institutions, they may know a little bit more about this, also New York, LA, and Mexico City.
I mean, I've had some experiences in museums in Europe. I just came back from Vienna from doing a show for Tatiana Bilbao. And we were working, I mean, this show comes from a bigger show we did at the Louisiana Museum. And just planning for that show was, I think, 3.5 years. So yeah, I mean, I've done shows also here in Mexico. Actually, when Alive was at Munal, I was working for Bosco Sodi. I mean, it's different budgets, different timeframes, different way of working, but in the end, it's almost the same. You get a budget, you produce with that, you deal with it, I think.
All right, I can move on to the next question. Ulrike Figueroa Vilchis had a question for the panel. He asked, would they be able to give their opinion on what happened with EFI Artes? The recent change made it seem like it would be easier for a project to get funding, but it seems like the opposite happened.
Well, just to give a little of context of EFI Artes is tax stimulus. I don't know how to say it, but it's a way in which the fiscal in Mexico is trying to support the arts and the businesses, they can, instead of sending their taxes to the fiscal, they can donate them to arts organizations. So for the question, the changes that they made to this type of grant or incentive, tax incentive, well, I don't think that it really changed anything. I mean, what it's actually interesting is, well, that the government is trying to keep this type of program, so the private sector can keep like supporting the arts and have some sort of tax incentive for that. But yeah, I think it is not changing, and a lot of, I mean, it's fine. It's a good program. We just need to figure out more ways to involve more private sector businesses to be interested in the arts, because I believe, as what I said in the presentation, people here in Mexico, they still believe that the arts should be for free, that they should be given by the state. So sometimes they are not interested in investing in the arts.
Yeah, thank you, Andrea. I love all the funding related questions. We have one last question by Vanessa Quintero. this one specifically for Alive. Alive, I like that you share your experience of how your perspective towards an institution's collective shifted after seeing the interaction individuals in protest and performance arts had with multicultural objects like monuments. I was wondering if you can perhaps share another experience that shifted your idea of working with collections in institutions.
Yes, sure. I love that question. I think there's a lot of experiences that we all can share. And when you shift your work, when you have different experiences, I think one that also changed my perspective while doing curatorial work was also the show that Sebastian was talking about, the Boscosori show. It was a show that it was just connections between these viceregal art from the 16th century with abstract works from these contemporary artists. And the connections were formal, were really exploration to the matter of the elements that were in these paintings, in these sculptures. And I also, when I'm in a museum, I mean, I love museums, of course, but when I'm going into the galleries, I was giving tours, or I was just looking just to the galleries, hearing conversations. I just love to know what is happening in this, like, also performative aspect of what happens in the galleries. And I remember there was this kid in one of the galleries by Strigal Art, and he was looking at at one of these paintings by Boscosori. Was a really like red one, and it was just in a dialogue with very bloody depictions of viceregal art of Jesus Christ and other virgins in there. And I remember how this kid was just talking about the colors and about his experience with the artwork, and not just like this very authoritarian and theoretical aspects of understanding contemporary art. I think when I just hear that kind of experience and the dialogue and all the things that he had, because children they didn't have any filters, so they really express what they are thinking, what they are feeling. And when I hear that, I think it was just also a way of how you engage with that conversations. I think the museum usually just talks from a position of power, and they give these connections and they do this, but we have to facilitate these interactions. And that's one of the things that doing this exhibition, it was really important for me to hear this from the children, from different people who were visiting the museum, and also just to remember, because I always tell them to my fellow curators, we're working for the public, we're not working for the institution. I think it's really important to hear that, and just to collaborate and facilitate all of those interactions. That I think hearing that, living through that, hearing from the people who are enjoying an exhibition or just visiting a museum, it was also another experience that shaped how you can think about art and how you can work with art. I think there's a lot of complexities also around that, but I think that's one connection that one experience that I really enjoyed and helped me in my work.
Thank you so much to the three of you. This was really exciting. And I'm so glad it worked so well. Yeah.
Great. Thank you so much, Nawi, and all of our wonderful panelists. And I'm going to bring Jennifer West back on just to make a couple comments about upcoming Roski talks. And then we're going to call it a night. Jennifer, take it away.
Hi, everyone. Just wanted to wrap it up by letting you know about the next two Roski talks. These are in-person talks that are taking place here at Mateo that include the larger Roski community, and you can RSVP for them online on our website. On October 5th, we're going to have scholar and faculty member at USC in the theater school, Mei-Ling Chang, and our esteemed colleague, Jenny Lin, in conversation on October 5th. Jenny, maybe you could put the subject in the chat. Jenny's here, but she can't speak live. And then on October 19th, we're going to have the Los Angeles-based artist Core Poor, who's going to be here live for the Roski talk. And then, again, these are taking place in person here at the downtown location. I hope you can make it. And it was lovely, great having you all tonight. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Nawi and everyone. Have a great night, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you so
Thank you so
much.
much.